Imagine you are a philosopher. You have cracked the code of the universe. You realize that nothing exists outside your own mind. The trees, the streets, the people sitting across from you, they are all just a dream you are having. You are the only real thing in existence. There's a technical word for this, solipsism. The absolute belief that your mind is the only reality, and the rest of us are just phantoms floating through your consciousness. If you are a dedicated solipsist, what is your next logical move? Your next move is to write a letter. This actually happened. A logician named Christine Ladd Franklin wrote a letter to Bertrand Russell, explicitly defending her absolute solipsism. And Russell noted she wrote to him saying she was a solipsist and was completely surprised there weren't more of them. Think about the twisted logic of that sentence. You are so thoroughly convinced that you are the only mind in the universe that you sit down, grab a pen, and write a letter to a figment of your imagination to complain about your loneliness? A bad philosopher writes a letter to a ghost to complain about isolation. A great philosopher declares that hell is other people. But a great dramatist like Harold Pinter, while adapting Franz Kafka, realizes that even if other people are just a nightmare you are having, they can still put their hands on your throat and twist a knife into your heart. Twice. I'm Erin Trommater.
I'm Sila Blume.
I'm Erin Brown, and this is World Cinema History.
Today we are putting Orson Welles up against Harold Pinter to see who truly understands the architecture of the trap in Franz Kafka's The Trial. Before we begin breaking down the void, let's get some opening thoughts on the two versions of The Trial we watched this week. Orson Welles gave us a towering expressionist vision, visually overwhelming, operatic, and unforgettable. The second version, directed by David Jones, with Harold Pinter's screenplay, takes a very different path. I'll be honest with you, for me, the 1993 film by Jones and Pinter is the one that gets under my skin and stays. And remember that name, Harold Pinter. He'll be with us next week, too. Let's hear from Erin and Sila. Erin, last week we watched Moreau navigate the sun-drenched, indifferent absurdity of Camus' world in two different versions of The Stranger. This week, we are dealing with Kafka's architectural nightmare. Looking across all four of these films, where do you see these absurd shifting gears? And looking into my mind, why do you think I connected these films when I scheduled them back to back?
I think possibly because of just how absurd while trying to seem normal they all tried to be. Almost laughably dark. They all four had a similar, the world is crazy and we're going to laugh at you if you don't agree, kind of a vibe to them. For the ones this week, I actually preferred the Orson Welles version.
Most people do.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not alone in that. For two reasons. One, the music of the Pinter Jones version gave it a TV movie feel. It was very overwrought, very, this is dramatic stuff that is happening and you will feel drama at this time. And the other part is Kyle MacLachlan has a weird face. And I keep expecting, anytime I see him, for David Lynch to just jump out and go, "Ha ha! Fooled you! And now here's Isabella Rossellini and a severed ear." Doesn't
Unlike
happen.
that handsome devil Anthony Perkins, who never played a weirdo.
Oh yeah, dude never played a weirdo. But not once in his entire career. Now, I like Anthony Perkins. His portrayal of Joseph K. Okay, there was an entirely different vibe. That I think they were going for an entirely different vibe. There was a gay subtext. Because Anthony Perkins was gay, but he had to hide that because, it was the 50s and 60s. He had to have the public think he was straight, so he couldn't come out for a very long time. It was kind of an open secret type of a thing in Hollywood. Orson Welles kind of went with that and gave it the vibe that that's why Joseph K. was being persecuted. Here was this thing that is being deemed wrong. We're never told what Joseph K. did, because that's irrelevant to the story.
He didn't actually shoot anyone on a beach, so we don't actually have a crime here, unlike last week.
So there's no actual crime that we can really put our finger on, and so Orson Welles gave it that as subtext as the crime, because it's not really a crime. In certain places, legally it was, but morally it's not. And so he used that subtext, and you could see it in Perkins's performance. And it just gave it a depth that I appreciated. And I didn't feel that depth with the Jones-Pinter version. I was just annoyed, and it was like... And again, Wells pointed this out, it was like a nightmare. It had the cadence of a nightmare. It felt like, these ridiculous things are happening, but they make total sense in the context of the thing you're watching, but you can't escape it. And it's absurd and ridiculous and stupid, but it makes sense in the context. The Jones-Pinter version leaned more heavily into that, and I didn't like it. It was uncomfortable and unpleasant.
Sila Blume, again, psychoanalyze me for a moment, but when you were watching this after watching the two versions of The Stranger last week, what was Eric thinking?
I am a little bit nervous to be put in that situation.
It's a dark place, isn't it?
To me, it's very simple. Two sides. One, both are strangers. Both are being, at least in the stories, put outside of society. Number two, both societies are operating to show the individual that they have the power. I think more in the trial situation, I had to think again and again about the Truman Show. That's not quite fitting for The Stranger. But The Stranger, as you alluded to last week, Camus did not like the interpretation in English of the outsider. I think he has no real, I wouldn't say right, but his understanding of English, I don't think is embedded enough in the culture and the spirituality and the intellectuality of the language to know the feeling of the word outsider, just like the word happy in German does not exist as such as we carry it in the tone when we say it in English. The same situation happens with Der Prozess, which is the original title in German, which not only means the trial, but also means the ordeal. Both films have to be considered heavily based on how you see the titles.
Sila, you watched both films and also read the Kafka novella in German. Any thoughts about which film caught Kafka's kind of nightmarish version of the story best? To me, when I first read The Trial back in high school, the thing that I thought Kafka did best, that's how my nightmares are. I'm in a room doing something normal, and I open a closet, and the people who are chasing me are being flogged in front of me, and then I open another door in the closet, and I'm in a completely different space. Which film do you think did that?
I think that's another comparison. I don't know if you intended it. The way Camus writes is a very, very simplistic style. Extremely, a little bit too much. for me, for my taste at least. It is not because he doesn't have words to say it more complicated, but because he has the ability to fill the simplistic statements in that novel, make them simple, but that simplicity makes it heavy. And that's obviously not written in German, but the one from Kafka was written originally in German. The description that he uses for the way the two men dressed in black walk, the way at the end, the way Kay looks at them, there is so much detail, which is not something exceptional. I mean, that happens a lot, actually, most of the time. Camus is different. Camus is not so much that he's about detail, but it's about simplicity.
In Kafka, he'll pass a yellow wall and you'll have details about the yellow wall and how the shadow strikes the yellow wall. Whereas in Camus, you'll just know the wall is yellow.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But the time in which he wrote it, which is he wrote it around the beginning of the First World War, and the way man spoke in Germany, which is very different to the way they speak now. That language, and that is not poetry, but turning into, in German they call that Dichtung, which means also how you spell something. The way he tells that story, the detail is extremely German, extremely in that very...
especially the repeated little phrases.
Yeah.
And the way he'll summarize exactly what a character has just said, have the narrator say it again. If you came here for my deep analysis of Orson Welles, normally we do the camera angles. Normally we do the ceilings. We normally do the wells. Not this time. We won't. We won't be. We're Team Pinter Jones here on World Cinema History. Or at least I am. When you listen to the 1993 trial, and I think this is what, Erin, you were missing with the music, you are listening to a comic version of Kafka, a very darkly comic version of Kafka. The musical cues are not set to heighten the drama. They are there to heighten the verbal jokes. It sounds like normal everyday speech, but to Sila's point, if you count the beats of the Harold Pinter scripted 1993 version, you realize that Pinter has built a highly syncopated 8-count grid. The stresses don't land in a clean march. They hit on the second beat, the fourth beat, then suddenly double up on the fifth. And it creates this jagged little acceleration right in the middle of the sentence. It's like, dee-dum, dee-dum, dee-dee. Before the law there stands a guard. The court doesn't want anything from you. It's a brilliant piece of formal deception. The rhythm is kept just off meter enough to pass as ordinary slang, just as the music is kept just off meter enough to pass as standard made-for-television BBC music. It masquerades as natural speech, but it's actually a rigid and mechanical trap, because the language is a hidden machine. The actors have to treat the script like a precise musical score. Look at how Anthony Hopkins delivers the Before the Law parable. He doesn't read it for standard emotional drama. He hits those exact unnatural accents with a cold, flat-faced authority.
Before the law stands a doorkeeper. A man from the country comes up to the doorkeeper and begs for admission to the law. But the doorkeeper tells him that he cannot grant him admission now. The man ponders this and then asks if he will be allowed to enter later. Possibly, the doorkeeper says, but not now. Since the door leading to the law is standing open, as always, and the doorkeeper steps to one side, the man looks through the door. And seeing this, the doorkeeper laughs and says, "If it attracts you so much, go on and try to get in without my permission. But you must realize that I am powerful. I am only the lowest doorkeeper. At every hall, there is another doorkeeper, each one more powerful than the last. Even I cannot bear to look at the third one."
You hear that precision? That is why Kyle MacLachlan's deadpan lecturing style is the only way to survive the scene. He isn't just playing a straight arrow middle manager, he's protecting the rhythm of the text. If he tries to emote or panic, he'll break the syncopation, and the entire architecture of the scene collapses. The horror only works because the language stays perfectly camouflaged as everyday slang while it quietly seals his fate. Let's look closer at the musical architecture. Pinter was a poet first. He hears dialogue like music, in cadences, loops, and repetition. If you pay close attention to the way the text loops and repeats, you realize that you can almost, not quite, but almost squeeze the most famous and devastating exchange in the entire story into a literal limerick.
There once was a man from Peru who dreamed he was eating his shoe. He awoke with a fright in the middle of the night to find that his dream had come true.
If you stack the rhythm in those lines back to back, the classic A-A-B-B-A bouncing meter of a joke or a limerick is sitting right there beneath the surface. It flows exactly like this. The court doesn't want anything from you. It receives you whenever you come to. It dismisses you then when you leave it again, for they've already decided to damn you. Now, I promise my head is not completely up my own ass here. Think about how brilliant and deeply unsettling that is. Orson Welles treats this material like a grand operatic expressionist tragedy, and he does it masterfully. But Jones and Pinter recognize the inherent deadpan comedy baked into Kafka's original text. They dress absolute existential doom in the light, skipping cadence of a nursery rhyme. The court isn't cruel. It is structurally unserious. It is a bureaucracy that treats human life like a playground. Sila and Erin, when you compare the two, which one worked better for you? Pinter's sing-song verbal trap or Wells's visual nightmare?
The dialogue of the Pinter-Jones version, I didn't pick up on that, on it trying to be poetic. It just annoyed me. It just felt unnatural and weird, and like it was trying to be funny, but like not in a way that I enjoyed. The part that felt more nightmarish to me, like when he goes to visit Tintorella, and Tintorella opens the door and it's right back into the halls of the court. Just the passageways opening off unexpectedly. That felt more nightmarish to me, but the visuals of the Orson Welles version, like when he and Lainey are on the books, there's this room full of books, and there they are, and we don't know why the books are there, but there they are, because it's a nightmare. It doesn't have to make sense if it's a nightmare. I thought that version, the visuals captured the nightmarish quality to me better than the dialogue of the Pinter-Jones version.
For me, Orson Welles is working with his vision based on that novel. But he is in many ways not at all thinking about what Kafka intends to do. In the nightmarish, I only see even the surrealistic approach, which is very well connected to nightmarish, is very present in Orson Welles' version. And to me, the other one, it looks crazy, it looks absurd, but not nightmarish. To me, is not as surrealistic. It's not cut. The cuts, the scenes in Orson Welles' version, they're very, very juxtaposed. There's a lot of stuff going on where you think this is he's adding to the craziness, and I find Jones is just taking it 1-to-1 and just based and it's a lot closer to the detailed succession of the whole novel in the Jones version, where the other one is a little bit more even the interesting approach which Orson Welles takes, which I think is, and that's why I keep saying I don't like to compare the two. The approach, the idea that Orson Welles has to separate the film from that parable, the one with the countryman trying to enter the law, he puts it as like a caricature at the beginning, and now with this background we'll go into the story, and Jones makes it as what it is. It is part of the situation, which I think is very, very important, and that's why I point out to the lack of comparison or the interest in non-comparing, because they're just taking very, very different approaches to the same idea. When I see the Jones version, and I see that he put, just by that different approach of putting the priest towards the end of the film in context with the Italian business person that comes and he should go with him to the cathedral, that tells me even more that this is similar to the Truman Show. Everybody, just like I read somewhere else, the girls, the little girls, the 3 different women, everybody is the court. And the only person who is not in the system is Kay. Everybody else is. That's why the Italian guy doesn't show up, because he's actually set up to go there, based on the way I calculated, so that the priest can approach him. And again, that is all the workings of the court, just like in the Truman Show. Nothing is done except for that person. Everything is being done for Kay.
I would say Jones actually cuts his film in a way that heightens that even more than Welles. And he creates a structural trap. He's cutting movement during the interrogation. He does something that completely violates this kind of standard Hollywood syntax, or what we call film grammar when we're talking in textbook terms. He cuts from one moving camera directly to another moving camera, keeping both in identical mid-shots. One camera is constantly drifting past the face of the silent onlookers while the other tracks the speakers. Because the framing never changes and the kinetic movement never stops, the edit feels completely seamless and deeply uncanny. The camera doesn't belong to the character. It belongs to the machinery of the court. It proves that the act of speaking and the act of watching are locked in the exact same rhythmic orbit. There's no escaping the velocity from the frame. Before Kay even realizes he's on trial, Jones' camera already has shown the audience the terrifying truth. Kay is a man who is always, to Sila's point, being watched. And that works for me. And I'm going to be on record as saying it actually worked for me better than the grand guignol of the chateaus that Welles embeds things in to create this sort of filmic paranoia in his film. Sila, to your other point, I think the two versions, because of the framing of the before the law section, which of course Kafka wrote as a separate short story and was incorporated in some but not all versions of the trial when it got published, because of the way that it's incorporated, the two films actually have two completely different morals. Welles is writing a version of the trial that is indicting a system, whereas because of where we frame that line. This door was meant only for you, and now I'm going to shut it. In the Pinter version, it is an internal struggle because the trial is all Kay. To Erin's point, Kay, this is about Kay feeling unnecessary guilt. And we'll get into this when we talk about the philosophy of absurdism and where Kafka got these ideas from in the first place. But where what Pinter and Jones are showing you is someone's internal guilt on trial. What Wells is showing you is an oppressive system. What Pinter and Jones are showing you is a cold and uncaring universe. What Wells is showing you is a very post-Holocaust, post-Hiroshima, Nagasaki, where the system doesn't care about you. Which version of that you consider closer to Kafka's original Moreau is, of course, as up to you as your interpretation of Kafka.
That paranoia makes a lot of sense. It being the system causing the paranoia, especially with the subtext of Kay being gay. And, like, in the wake of the McCarthy trials, people in Hollywood were being blacklisted because they might be communists. Oh no. It would make a lot of sense for Wells to say the system is corrupt, the system is inescapable, and the system is a nightmare. The Pinter-Jones version had good points to it that I liked, but because it was internal to Kay, it felt claustrophobic. And not in a good way. Like, not that there's a good way to feel claustrophobic, but the paranoia felt internalized, and it just felt bad watching it. And the Orson Welles version, I didn't feel bad watching it. I felt bad for Kay, but it was a lot more understandable, and it wasn't as just disturbing. And maybe it was supposed to be disturbing, and if that's the case, that's fine. That's just not my thing at all. Thinking about the Wells version as it being the system is after you, just, especially for me right now, with the way things are in the world right now, that one, it really resonates a lot more for me.
And there is something to be said about Wells doing a much more straightforward version and Pinter doing a much more comic version. The darkness of the comedy actually makes it more and not less disturbing.
Listen, we're going to take care of that nightshirt for you. You don't mind, do you? We're going to look after all your underwear, in fact. But don't worry. If your case turns out all right, you'll get it all back.
You see, it's much better you give it to us than leave it in the depot. If you leave it in the depot, it'll either be pinched or they'll sell it. In any case, you'll never see it again. You'll never see your underwear again.
If you leave it in the depot.
Excuse me.
And that's the type of humor that you have through here, whereas for context, Wells' version has these moments of genuinely awkward humor, like Kay pedantically correcting someone for using the made-up word ovular to describe a dent in the rug. It's kind of a joke that only a pompous bureaucrat would make. It runs about halfway through the movie because it keeps coming up over and over and over again. And unfortunately, Wells had so many technical problems in terms of the dubbing and having to film things so that lips would be off screen, and then only having Perkins for a day to do all of his dubbing, so Perkins couldn't really nail his performance. And 7, I counted, voices of different characters are actually Orson Welles, including the painter and the magistrate are actually Orson Welles voicing them, and he doesn't even bother to use an accent or anything. And all of that was budgetary. And so, and I am not deducting points for that. I just found the comedy of the Jones-Pinter version and Jones's camera choices to be more disturbing and thus more, may I say, without too many people booing me, Kafka-esque. Boo, I'm booing myself.
I like what you said before about the approaches that Jones takes, or Pinter, and the approach that Wells takes in terms of who is being attacked, who is being analyzed, who is being criticized. Of course, the basis is whatever Kafka is doing, because of the surrealistic cut, the editing that I see, the way I see it with my very simple knowledge or lack of knowledge about cinema and camera works, it takes a lot of place in the drama, in the artistic value of I'm making a film. In Wells' version is extremely powerful, maybe not because it is so impressive, but because it is so typical Wells. At least what I know from Wells, the play with the shadows, Lenny trying to hide behind before she ends up in the bunch of papers on the floor, the shadow of Orson Welles walking around. It's so much art in this film, where I find in the other one is just the story is the only one leading.
Thinking caps on. Time to trace the bloodline of this intellectual disease. We're mapping the family tree of the modern trap, from 1840s Denmark down to Harold Pinter's typewriter. I'll throw out the questions, and you name the link. We start with the great-grandfather, Søren Kierkegaard, in Copenhagen in 1843, preaching absolute trembling isolation before God. Then his angry German son shows up. He declares God is dead and tells us we have to invent our own values while staring into the abyss. Who was this angry son? Anyone?
Otto von Bismarck.
Close enough. It was Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah, that was my answer. The poet. Some philosophers claim that he was a poet, not a philosopher.
And some poets claim he was a philosopher because nobody wants him.
Well, God wants him.
But Friedrich Nietzsche didn't want anything to do with God. He took Kierkegaard's isolation and he stripped away the divine safety net. Now the family is stranded with no rules. Next, we get the two weird uncles. They hate each other, won't even sit at the same Thanksgiving table. Uncle number one had an intense, youthful love affair with solipsism. He wrote in his Tractus that the limits of his language are the limits of his world. Now, some people think he was half kidding even then. Later, he got bored of her, slammed the door, and walked away from pure isolation for good, embracing language as a shared cage of rules. Uncle number two is hiding in the Black Forest wearing lederhosen, screaming that we've been forgotten by being and that we are all just thrown into a world heading straight toward death. Basically, Ted Kaczynski with better prose. Name these two feuding uncles.
Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner?
I'm too serious for this. I think of Wittgenstein, but I don't know what the lederhosen, who's wearing those. I don't know who that is.
Ludwig Wittgenstein is correct. Martin Heidegger is the man in the lederhosen.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Question 3, the tragic grandson. Before the cousins arrive, we have the grandson. He takes Kierkegaard's isolation and Heidegger's terror and turns the whole crisis into a dusty Prague courtroom full of clerks who won't tell you why you're guilty. Who is the architect of our modern paranoia? This should be an easy one.
Trent Reznor.
Ooh, close.
Joseph K.
Close enough. Franz Kafka. He's the crucial bridge. Without him literalizing the void as an actual courtroom, we never get Camus, Beckett, or Harold Pinter. Question 3. The French cousins. Now we cross into the mid-20th century. Two cousins inherit the baggage and turn it into art. Cousin number 1 is the Algerian who says the universe is meaningless and a joke, but we should imagine Sisyphus happy anyway. Cousin 2 is the Irishman in Paris who thinks smiling is far too optimistic. He takes Wittgenstein's skepticism about language and turns it into outright hostility, trapping his characters in garbage cans and mud pits, mutilating syllables while they wait for a man who never shows up. Who are these two cousins?
Christopher Guest and Guffman. Aleister Crowley and the Pope.
Ooh, so close. Sila Blume.
Well, the first one is Camus. The second one, I'm not sure.
Albert Camus is correct. Samuel Beckett. Samuel Beckett is the weirdo Irishman in Paris. And we finally get the question for the British heir. The final heir of this cursed estate. He takes the entire family trauma, Kierkegaardian isolation, Nietzschean abyss, Wittgensteinian linguistic prison, and both cousins' love of the void, and sets it all inside an ordinary British sitting room. Who is the keeper of the modern cage?
Well, that's obviously Michael Palin.
That was a great answer. Who is the other keeper of the modern cage, Sila Blume?
I am lost in this game. I really don't know.
Harold Pinter. Harold Pinter. He runs Wittgenstein's Limits of Language through Beckett's brutal minimalism. Boy, that's a mouthful. And gives us the sparse, looping, bureaucratic language we hear in the 1993 film. Pinter didn't just adapt Kafka, he inherited him. Erin, when you look at this whole lineage, does Pinter feel like the logical final boss, or is he doing something slightly different?
Well, the way that you've set it up, it certainly looks that way.
In fairness, though, that's because I wrote it.
In fairness, that's because it's how you wrote it. In reality, I don't know nearly enough about philosophy to argue with you, so I'm going to say, yeah, that tracks.
Sila Blume, am I full of shit?
No, I know even less about philosophy.
Because Pinter doesn't just write dialogue, he writes loops. Let's look at how this functions mechanically in the 1993 film.
I must phone a lawyer.
Phone who you like.
I need a lawyer.
I don't see the point, quite frankly.
You don't see the point of my calling a lawyer when I'm supposed to be under arrest? What the hell are you talking about?
No. All I meant was, I just don't see the point of calling a lawyer. Well then, I won't.
Exactly. It's a linguistic erosion. The words stop being vehicles for communication and become a physical barrier. Wells does this with shadows and infinite sets in his own spectacular way, but Pinter does it by making the characters chew on the exact same syllable until they choke on it. Erin, look at Kyle MacLachlan's face during these loops. I know you didn't particularly care for his performance.
Do I have to? I just think he has a weird face.
In fairness, it is difficult to perform Pinter because of the meter that we were talking about earlier. It is more like interpreting sheet music than it is reading straight dialogue. I love it. I love his performance for that.
I think that's fair, but I would have to watch the movie a few more times to get that, because when I watched it, I had to keep stopping and starting it because I was just like, I can only take so much at a time of this movie. And I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying it just had a vibe that I didn't like. And I don't think the performances were bad. I don't think the film was bad. I don't think anything about it was bad. It just was hard to get through. I did like that Polly Walker was in it. That made me happy. Great.
And surprise Anthony Hopkins.
I'm always happy to see Anthony Hopkins. He's just fun. I think that for what it was, Kyle MacLachlan's performance was good. I just didn't like what it was. That's all I can really say.
In 1962, Wells lets you see the gears of the grand machine turning. In 1993, Pinter shows you that machine is just a language game where the house always wins and you don't even know the rules. Obviously, the Wells version worked better for you, but which do you think was truer to the novella that you read?
I find definitely that Jones is a lot more, I wouldn't say 100%, but he's a lot more committed to not just the novella, but the context in the, let's say, psychological and philosophical mind of Kafka. To me, Wells is determined, and I think I might be correct in assuming that he's very, very in love with himself, Wells, so that he is claiming, I'm not saying that's not true, but he is using the content of the novella to create his own art. And I don't think Jones is doing that. I think Jones is a lot more straightforward, basing the rhythm, many aspects, and the feeling of the city is a lot more closer to what I see in the novella.
And ultimately, Jones' ending is very true to Kafka, whereas Wells completely abandons Kafka's ending.
The ending of Wells is pure crazy. It has nothing.
It's almost
nothing
like
to do
he
with
just
novella.
filmed it with because he didn't have a better idea.
Yeah, exactly. He says, "Okay, what are we?"
Why is that a mushroom cloud?
It's I like it. Well, you have mentioned before about the usage of comedy, although Wells is at the beginning extremely, like you said, with his repetitions and the absurdity of people walking into your room. The way he sets it up is very, very comedic, but also that ending, like he's asking, well, if you guys cannot do it, I'll do it myself. It's so funny. I did not laugh, but
No. The comedy is he refuses to do it himself because he's going to make them do their job because they're the bureaucracy and that's what they're paid to do.
Mm. Yeah, well, they just give up. They just say, okay, hell with this, and then they throw dynamite. But this is why one of the reasons I have been trying to read the books, because of this concept that you started with these films. I need to know, and I'll mention that again that I mentioned last week. I like very much the idea, and I'll take this opportunity to express my deepest gratitude for you conceiving or structuring this podcast, namely to think not just about what cinema is, but what's behind it, and to include and give at least me the possibility to say, okay, when we are going to look at these films, like I said last week, are we thinking about the comparisons, who did the best job or who took it this way or that way? But we're also forced to think about the story itself as it was told by whoever created it. And I think that's a very, very different level to criticizing a lot of movies without dissecting it from who wrote it. I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity to go in this way into certain pieces of art.
Thank you, Sila. And by the way, next week I do not expect you to read all 4,000 pages of verses a la Recherche du Temps Perdu. You're welcome.
Merci.
Here's where I'm going to defend Orson Welles, because Welles does something extraordinary in this film, and that's the first trap he sets with, I think, a brilliant gimmick. And I'm using the word gimmick as a positive here, because I'm saying he had to put a handle on the material, and he did. He distorts our frame so completely that the nightmare becomes visually undeniable. Where David Jones and Harold Pinter give us the second trap. They keep the camera flat, distant, and dry. They make the executioners look like boring clerks. Soren Kierkegaard famously wrote that there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, and the other is to refuse to believe what's true. And that's the ultimate, I think, dividing line between these two films. And because the setting looks so ordinary, Joseph K. falls into the trap of refusing to believe what is true. He refuses to see that the dull bureaucracy around him is lethal until the knife is already turning. Where Welles maps the delusion of the state with unforgettable images. And this is the trick that he pulls. He's constantly shooting with Dutch angles, with the camera off on a slant. It almost looks like one of the tripod legs was broken, which, given the low-budget nature of his film, may also be. Then suddenly, when we get to the cathedral, the Dutch angles stop. And it's that moment that you realize he's been using this Dutch angle so much that you are used to the world being distorted, being at an angle, and you only notice it when it's gone. And to me, that's the most Kafka-esque. I hate that phrase. I hate that I wrote that down. That is the most true to Kafka of anything out of the two films. And it's even more unforgettable, I think, but what Jones and Pinter do by mapping the denial of the victim with someone quieter, even for me, that is more devastating. That final line, like a dog, straight from Kafka, to me, got under my skin. Whereas at the end of the Wells film, I was asking, is that a mushroom cloud? Did he just put a fucking mushroom cloud in an adaptation of a 1915 novella?
You! You dummies! You'll have to do it! You'll have to kill me! Come on! Come on!
Which brings us to that final, inevitable destination for both men, the quarry, the execution. Wells, true to his grand scale, gives Anthony Perkins that explosive, defiance-filled exit where he laughs in the face of dynamite. Jones and Pinter give Kyle MacLachlan a quiet, sterile slaughter where he dies.
Like a dog.
Because the book was written before the Holocaust. And I couldn't bear the defeat of Kay in the book after the Holocaust. I'm not Jewish, but we are all Jewish since the Holocaust.
And I think that is the difference between the two. For Jones and Pinter, writing with the cold hindsight of the late 20th century, they recognize that the real horror isn't an explosive spectacle. It is a quiet, sterile, administrative erasure. And that, for me, landed harder.
I definitely think that the Pinter-Jones version had the better ending. I mean, suddenly dynamite. It was a choice.
The rumor is that Wells had no idea what to film, and he only had Perkins left for one day of shooting, and the prop department came up with dynamite, and he said, "We're ending it with dynamite, people." That feels true.
That
Whether
does
it's
feel
true. Or
true.
not, that feels true.
As a zero-budget filmmaker, that feels so true. It's like, how do we end this film? Fuck it, dynamite. We'll just put in some stock footage of a mushroom cloud and that'll be the end of it. It tracks the actual ending, because I'm not going to accept that dynamite is the actual ending. Pinter-Jones ending.
Does it not help that it's filmed so incredibly badly? It is edited so incredibly badly. It is so obviously filmed so that you don't have to sync the lips to any of the actors.
Yeah.
I think two of them are stand-ins that he had just hired for that day.
Yeah.
That probably doesn't help. Or that
it just
Orson
felt
Welles is actually voicing one of them.
Yeah. I did notice him voicing a few people.
His voice.
You know, the funny thing is that, like, up until that point, I didn't realize that it was a low-budget film. I didn't know that the film had a minimal budget. He did a lot with a little, and that's what you have to do when you have no budget, and he knew how to do that. He did great. It's just the ending is like, this looks like an Ed Wood ending. This looks like somebody said, and then it's going to end with a big explosion. And so it did, even though it makes no sense, you know? Down
to the fact that you can actually see the shadow of the camera in the shot of the pit.
Yeah, he gave no shits at that point, is what it felt like. I thought the whole rest of the film was really good. The visual nightmare of it, I really liked that. I liked it better than the verbal nightmare of the Pinter-Jones version, even though I fully accept that the Pinter-Jones version was closer to what Kafka wanted. I even thought so at the time when I was watching this version. I was like, this is very much an Orson Welles adaptation of somebody else's work, because it had his fingerprints all over it. And that's fine, because if you like Orson Welles and you go to see an Orson Welles film, you want to see an Orson Welles film, you know? And this was.
You should have been here 1 hour and 5 minutes ago. You were a house painter?
No. What's happening to me is of no great importance. But I think it is representative of what's happening to a great many other people as well. Maybe you wanted some practice in fooling an innocent man. Perhaps you found some amusement in the fact that I seriously expected you to be interested in justice.
1 moment. I merely wish to point out that tonight you have thrown away with your own hand all the advantages which an interrogation invariably confers on an accused man.
Just you wait.
The fact that this was so badly dubbed didn't bother you? Orson Welles giving himself the best lines by dubbing the voices of all the characters. You didn't have like a seizure the way I did when Chitterelli opens his mouth and it's Orson Welles and he's the magistrate, and he gives himself all the best lines in this movie. And he gives himself the before the law speech twice.
Yeah.
Before the law, there stands a God.
It didn't bother me because of how many Italian films we've been watching. I'm so used to dubbing that it didn't even register.
Fair. Completely fair.
Yeah.
How about the fact that you have these long tracking shots where you can't see their lips show up for just a moment, and then you can't see their lips again? Or Wells, as the lawyer, buries himself underneath a mound of clothing, films everybody from the back so that he doesn't have to worry about matching the lip sync.
Part of knowing your budget and working around it. It really didn't bother me. I didn't even really notice until I realized at the end was Orson Welles all over again. It didn't really bother me.
As you can tell, it bothered me a lot.
Yeah. And that's fair.
The other thing is, how about what we talked about in the Ozu episode, his use of the low, wide angles compared to the 50mm lens that we saw with Ozu, who was shooting from a similar setup, a hi-hat or a tripod that's only a couple of feet off the ground, and how much bigger the space feels in this versus the 1993 version, where you are almost, the claustrophobia is because everything is so crammed and tight. The claustrophobia in Wells is because he's shooting from these wide angles and these low angles that make everything to feel huge around the characters.
I think that added to the nightmarish quality, because it was just disorienting to have everything look so odd. I do think part of it was him showing off that there are ceilings. Kind of his thing.
We normally talk about the ceilings. We're not going to this time, but we normally do talk about the ceilings.
Yeah. I think that's part of his shtick, is he wants to show off the ceilings. And
there are some incredible shots in this film.
Oh, yeah.
The shot where they got thousands of people to sit at typewriters and he pans up
for
Kay's office.
That was
the
something.
Shot when he's escaping Chitterelli's office and the light's coming in from the slats, and he speeds the camera up to the point where the light coming in from the slats becomes a blur, and then he slows it down again so that you can see the figures. This is a film filled with incredibly beautiful shots. None of them connect to me. What's the old saying? The parts don't add up to the same equal as the whole. At the end of the film.
Greater than the sum of its parts?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
It's not greater than the sum of its parts. But some of those parts are extraordinarily beautiful.
That's one of the things I liked about it, is that, it opened with him talking about it being a nightmare, and it gave it that nightmarish quality. Like when he's in the audience at the theater, and it's shot basically from his feet. You don't see what he's watching at the theater, you just see him.
That's an 18mm lens, and you can actually see the distortion, the barreling on the sides of the frame. Wells doesn't care at that point, because this is a nightmare, and he tilts the camera at a Dutch angle again. By the end of the film, you've become so used to the barreling, it becomes a part of every frame.
Yeah, because dreams
we were watching a restored version of this, a digitally restored version of this. The version that I watched when I was in high school was a crappy could buy for $1 at a bin in Sears.
Wow.
Because this was a film that had gone out of copyright. Because because the financiers whose son would go on to finance like Superman and the Christopher Reeve version and the Three Musketeers, and at the time had absolutely no money, and they had lost the distribution rights because they had promised them to so many people to provide props for this film that so many people had said that they had copyright claim over it that it couldn't be distributed anywhere. And so they had to clean up that for years and years and years before we got a digital. But the version we were watching, much, much, much cleaner. Yeah. But it's still digital.
Yeah.
And so everything looks a little fuzzy, and it wasn't. Because that goes back to the film grain focusing your eyes when you're watching in a theater, the little dots making up every bit of a shot. Where when you clean all of those up, everything is just a little fuzzy. Perkins looks just a little waxy. The sets look a little overlit. But the fact of the matter is, this is one time where I think they did a good job. This is a far better looking film now than Wells made. Than the one that people watched in theaters. And far less messy. And they fixed some of the lip syncing issues as well.
Might be why I didn't notice it so much.
Jeanne Moreau looked like she was speaking in a different language in the original, and they somehow managed to sync her up. Like, they literally look, but they couldn't fix the sound, sounding like it's in a studio. No matter where you are, it sounded like they were in a record studio recording the dialogue.
Yeah.
Kafka, 2 years after writing this, wrote in his diaries a breakdown of the philosophy of anyone, the guy from last week, anyone? Soren Kierkegaard.
Yeah.
It is obvious to me, to anyone, I think, that absurdism was exactly his aim, and he's talking about the exact same void that Kierkegaard embraced through the leap of faith, and that Camus would later reject in The Stranger.
The different ways in which filmmakers, for the most part, Buñuel and several others, and even Monty Python, the different ways in which we play with reality to point out to things that should be questioned. Some of the ways we do that is with surrealism. Another famous way is absurdity. And my point is that the absurd that we refer to all the time cannot exist without the consideration either from the person speaking or the ones listening, the connection to the unreal. Because absurd, in a way, refers to what's not real, what we find it cannot happen. Camus, and certainly Kafka, I think they are very much referring to the absurd because, and perhaps only because, they are considering in their own little world that there are possibilities that we smell, that we suppose, that we want to talk about. And because we are talking to people who only know the norm, it sounds like absurd. But absurdity, as I think we all understand, has nothing to do necessarily directly with being crazy, but the possibility of mentioning something which is not common to the common man.
And I think Pinter really is the true great-great-grandson of absurdism. And the way that he uses the dialogue here, with the little repeated phrases, with the meter, with the almost but not quite iambic, the limerick style. There once was a man from Peru who dreamt that he had eaten his shoe. I think he is really the inheritor of both philosophical schools, absurdism from Kierkegaard, and then, of course, Wittgenstein And of course, this is via Beckett, and we'll talk about that next week when we're discussing All the Rest of Shit Comes for Two. The limits on the ability of language.
Yes.
Maybe that's why I glom on to the Jones-Pinter version, because that to me is more important than the nightmare aspect of Kafka. Sila, where can we find you on the internet?
I continue to do little things on silablume.life.
Erin Brown, where can people find you and our podcast on the interwebs?
You can find me at Blue Sky. I'm at Toad Puppy. On YouTube at Pizza Horse Productions, and you can find this podcast at ko-fi.com/world cinema history. Come check us out. We've got all of our old episodes. You can start a conversation with us in the comments. You can donate a little money so we can upgrade our equipment, or just buy some donuts. I don't know, something fun. Come check us out.
Thanks, Erin. And you can all find me at ETROMMATER on the artist formerly known as Twitter. That's all the time we have for this week. Next week, we are diving deep into Marcel Proust and the Labyrinth of Memory. For Erin Brown and Sila Blume, I'm Eric Trommater, and thank you for listening to World Cinema History.